Welcome to today's program, friends. I'm Dr. Jim Daly of Astronomy for Change, your host. In this video, we're going to discuss the Christmas star and why some stories and headlines today suggest that the Great Conjunction now occurring in our skies may be of the same type as presented in the Gospel according to Matthew. The following quote from the Gospel according to Matthew is often found on holiday greeting cards and is heard around the world during this season as a message of peace and hope. The year is over, and it's time to rest, to be with family, friends, and to prepare for the new year. And having heard the king, they went their way, and lo, the star which they had seen in the east went on before them until it came and stood over where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And they came into the house and saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. And opened their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The Spanish often refer to the three belt stars of Orion as Los Reyes Magos, or the Magic Kings. The seasonal significance of Orion's visibility during Christmas is clear, but why were these traveling kings considered magicians? The Spanish tradition isn't the only reference to these magi. It's pervasive throughout the eastern Mediterranean region and Western Asia through late antiquity and beyond. These travelers were a group of distinguished foreigners who visited Jesus after his birth, presenting him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh upon their arrival. They were learned men of science and mathematics, priests of Zoroaster, and practitioners of astrology, which at the time was considered a science in parallel with the real science of astronomy. Being true to their character, these men immersed themselves in the quest for wisdom, grounded in goodness, an essential aspect and tenet of their religion of Zoroastrianism, which, by some accounts, was the world's first religion. That they sought out the, quote, King of Kings, end quote, in his infancy would be consistent with their vocation and wisdom. That they looked to the stars to guide them would be consistent with their learning, intelligence, and insight. But what was the star? Was it a new star, a comet, a meteor, perhaps a supernova? This question has persisted since biblical times for those who are inquisitive and seek the truth, for those who yearn for a connection to the larger cosmos, for those who seek a benevolent deity to save us from ourselves, or for those who wish to link history and science and use that link as a bridge or gateway from the past through the present and into the future. So let's take a look at each possibility. Was it a supernova? Supernovae are quite rare and occur within a given galaxy approximately once or twice every century. If there have been 15 or 20 to have occurred in our galaxy, the Milky Way, since biblical times, that would be a lot. Moreover, supernovae are singular events whose light diminishes from a maximum to about half this value over about a 100-day period, depending on the type. This light curve is inconsistent with the biblical account of what was observed. Quote, and lo, the star which they had seen in the east went on before them until it came and stood over where the child was. End quote. There is no mention of the light of the star fading, and that it went on before them or moved is another aspect of the event that is inconsistent with a supernova, an event that remains at a fixed point in the sky. So it seems quite unlikely that the Christmas star was a supernova. Was it actually a comet? With the comet's ethereal beauty associated with its brightness and all that, this beauty could represent as a metaphor for the new light of hope that was born in many people's eyes as a child in a lowly manger, in a humble, lowly manger. It could be suggested that the star wasn't a star at all, but perhaps a comet. Additionally, comets do change their position on the sky from night to night as they move in their orbits around the sun, but they don't stop, as was suggested in the biblical account. Quote, until it came and stood over where the child was. End quote. We should also note that comets also change in brightness as they approach the sun, and then they fade as they recede. An aspect also inconsistent, like the supernova, with the biblical account of the star's appearance. There is no mention in the biblical account that the star changed in brightness. Remembering our discussion of the Magi, their education, their intelligence, wisdom, and insight, would quickly conclude that they would never allow or they would never follow a comet, as the appearance of a comet historically was always considered an omen or a harbinger of doom. For millennia, comets have inspired fear, dread, and awe in many different societies and cultures. And in fact, the word disaster or evil star, as its origins in Greek, dis evil and astron star, it is thus unlikely that our star was a comet. Meteors are shooting stars? Probably not. First, to clarify, meteors aren't stars at all, but small rocks and debris remaining after the formation of our solar system that burn up as the Earth moves in its orbit around the Sun, basically clearing a path of any debris in the path, right? They burn up through the heat of friction in the Earth's atmosphere. Their appearance is transient and temporal and very brief, behaving in a manner completely inconsistent with the biblical account of the star's appearance. They would never be considered as a candidate. The three magi would have seen meteors, they'd be aware of them, and they would know it could never be a meteor. And they wouldn't write it in the way as presented in the Gospel of Matthew. So what remains? What other objects besides the fixed stars and those possibilities discussed thus far could be a candidate for this enigmatic star? Was it a single planet's position? Not likely, since the changing position of the planets were well known by these men. Was the biblical star even a star at all? Or is the word star really a metaphor for something else, something far deeper and more meaningful? It is that opinion many scholars hold today when referring to the star, the Christmas star, or the Star of Bethlehem. For additional clues and insights, let's return to the biblical passage for a moment. Quote, "And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks by night." That's from the Gospel according to Luke. What can be inferred from this passage? What season was it? The passage suggests that the climate was mild and temperate, as the shepherds wouldn't have otherwise been, quote, "living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks by night," end quote. Nor would they have subjected their flocks to the cold of winter. One can infer from this passage that it was most likely the spring, that the shepherds were guarding their flocks as they gazed at night during the early spring. Let's take another look at the Magi. They were learned men, well educated, and would be looking for deeper meaning and insight into the occurrence of natural events and, according to their religious vocation, would seek to attribute significance and deeper meaning to those events. They were astute practitioners of astrology and keenly aware of the location of the planets in specific constellations of the zodiac. Your so-called zodiacal sign is simply the location of the sun on the day of your birth in a particular constellation of the zodiac, or the 12 constellations where the sun in its apparent yearly journey across the sky would be. We call that the plane of the ecliptic. We've discussed that in previous videos. Since the location of a single planet on the sky wouldn't necessarily result in the Magi mounting a long, arduous, and perhaps perilous journey, the star or event would have to have some meaning or something else far more rare and significant. We have counted the centuries since the birth of Jesus as having started in the year 0. In our man-made calendars, we mark his birth from the year 0 as a convenience, but astronomical events and the natural order aren't bound by our calendars. Was he really born in the year 0? Not necessarily. Modern technology has allowed us to recreate the sky forward or backward, and modern planetariums and software, like Stellarium, which we often use, can recreate the sky at any conceivable time or place in history, or in the future. So let's take a look at the position of the planets starting in the year 0 and work our way backwards. Using Stellarium, we're going to recreate the sky as it was on February 4th, 7 BCE, and take a look at and try to get an insight into what may have compelled the three magi, the three wise kings, to set out on their long, perilous journey to the east to visit the newborn child. With the current time and date set, we're going to turn the clock back to February 4th, 7 BCE, starting at the year 0, and run the clock backwards in 1-year increments and see how the sky changes as we go. I'm going to turn off the atmosphere and run the clock back. And this is what they know would have happened in the sky. Okay, let's turn on our constellations. Here's Pisces over here. Uranus is in Pisces. Here's Uranus, the planet Uranus. Here's Mercury, one of the planets that was involved, was part of the triple conjunction. That was most likely the famed Star of Bethlehem. Okay, so let's run the clock back. We're going to leave the constellations up while we do this. It's Pisces. Okay, here we go. Here's the moon, -1 BCE, 1 year BCE, 2, 3, 4. There's Venus and Saturn coming into view. 5. There's Mars. 6. Even in the year 6 BCE, it was quite spectacular in the sky. This is what it would have looked like during the day. You turn on the atmosphere, clearly we're not going to see it, right? We just know it's there. But the 3 wise men, the 3 kings, these learned men of ancient times, knew that this was happening, and that knowledge was enough to put them on this long, perilous journey to the east to see the child. And here we go, one more year. And there it is, the triple conjunction of Mercury, Saturn, and Mars. Mars, Saturn, and Mercury, with Uranus in the distant background, but as we will mention, they would have no way to know about Uranus. That wasn't discovered for 1788 years later, in the year 1781, by William Herschel. So this is what they knew was there in front of them to the east. And they walked this long, perilous journey to see the new child. February 4th, 7 BCE. This is just about not quite 10 a.m. in the morning. Capricorn's to the west, Aquarius to the west, Jupiter also part of this. I'm sure they knew they were well aware that Jupiter was also there, flanking the sun to the west in Aquarius, between Aquarius and Capricorn. Just literally at the boundary. Jupiter's right on the boundary of Aquarius and Capricorn, right here. Interesting also to point out where the ecliptic is. Let's take a look at the ecliptic. Path of the sun, the plane of the solar system. Okay. And every object in the solar system is going to be very close to that path. That's the plane of the planets as they orbit the sun. We call that the ecliptic path, the plane of the ecliptic. And it's right there. And all these are constellations of the zodiac: Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces over here. Here's the waning crescent moon over here. And that would be visible right before dawn. So if we run the clock back on that morning, turn the atmosphere back on, run the clock back, let's see where the pre-dawn sky looked on that day. The moon's in Sagittarius, flanked by Scorpio to the west. This is the pre-dawn sky on that morning. Okay, that's the pre-dawn sky. And this morning we will have that triple conjunction Let's bring forward and take another look at it. Okay, so that's to turn off the atmosphere again. And there it is. Mercury, Saturn, and Mars with Uranus in the background, flanked by Jupiter to the west of the Sun over here in Aquarius. I should mention Venus too is here, although Venus is well to the east. So there it is. With stellarium we can recreate the Star of Bethlehem. The mere knowledge of this is what compelled the three wise men, these three kings, these three learned men of old, to begin their perilous journey to visit the new child. And this is about 10:22 in the morning. Aquarius is the water bearer. Pisces are the fish. The twin fish. As far as the prominence or importance of the planets and their locations, as would have been attributed to them by the Magi, looking for these significant attributions, there is nothing significant in their placement until the year 7 BCE, -7. If we proceed backwards in time from the year 0 to the year 7 BCE, on February 4th in the year 7 BCE, a quadruple conjunction of the planets Mercury, Mars, Saturn, and Uranus occurs in the constellation of Pisces, with Jupiter flanking them to the west. This would be a very significant event, and it's probably the star declared as a metaphor that we often attribute to the Christmas star. The Magi would have been unaware of Uranus, since it is invisible without a telescope and wouldn't be discovered until much later, in the year 1781, by the famous English astronomer William Herschel. 1788 years later, on March 13th of that year. But they would have been aware of the visible conjunction of Mercury, Mars, and Saturn. What's more, the planet Venus is also in Pisces, as is Jupiter in Aquarius to the west, another zodiacally important constellation. A planetary conjunction, which is what we're discussing now, which is what's in our news, and we see it occurring here in our sky between Jupiter and Saturn. When two or more planets come within apparent close proximity of each other on the sky, a double conjunction is infrequent, as we know now with our great conjunction of 2020, not to be seen for 60 years hence, until the year 2080, while a triple conjunction is exceedingly rare. And this, most probably, was the Christmas star or the Star of Bethlehem. It is important also to remember that even though February technically is considered a winter month, the land of Judea is a semi-arid desert climate and closer to the equator than much of Europe, something that would tend to mitigate the climate even during February. This lends further credence to the idea that the shepherds, quote, living out in the fields nearby, keeping a watch over their flocks by night, end quote, would have been commonplace even in February. Moreover, that this very rare conjunction occurred in the constellation Pisces, a constellation considered holy and revered by the Jews, adds to the significance of the event and is something the Magi would be keenly aware of. During this time of the year, the sun is in Aquarius, the constellation immediately to the west of Pisces, and although the conjunction was closest on the 4th of February of that year, it would have been actually occurring during daylight, rendering it completely invisible. Being scholars and learned men with wisdom and insight, they would have deduced and been keenly aware of the important significance of the event, regardless of whether it was during the day or at night, and that it was invisible notwithstanding, they would have traveled to the east in search of the child. The knowledge of its occurrence and its significance was all that mattered, and most scholars thus agree that this was the wondrous Star of Bethlehem. So are we witnessing a similar event today in the year 2020? Most notably during the Christmas season. In fact, during the Christmas week. Christmas this year falls on Friday the 25th. Most scholars agree that the star, the wondrous Star of Bethlehem, was most likely this: a triple conjunction of the planets Mercury, Mars, and Saturn, with Uranus, and as we mentioned, Jupiter to the west. Whether it was or not isn't really important. That there was this star, distant and bright, real or a metaphor, everything good that a star represents, that there were these wise men who traveled a long, perilous journey to greet the infant child, is what really matters. It is a cause for hope in a troubled world. We too can look to the east, as they did, upon the brilliant jewels of Orion, brilliant Sirius, beckoning, and also now to the west, right after sunset, and know that there are others too who are gazing as we are, that this is the nexus that binds all of us together, the oneness with that great canopy of stars above, fellow travelers, all of us, upon this beautiful blue miracle in orbit around our home star. We're bound by a common origin, composed of elements forged in the nuclear cauldrons of long-dead stars. We look up at the stars as they did and our descendants will do, and in humility connect with each other in the past, the present, and into the future. It's quite apropos and fitting that this conjunction, the great conjunction of 2020, occurs now as an additional reminder during Christmas week, during the holiday season, as if nature is giving us a gift. Having almost completed yet another circuit around our star, we are reminded that in our smallest we are great and that we have this common bond. Let us concentrate on that, and let us all be at one and be at peace. The great philosopher Plato famously said, "Astronomy compels the soul to look upward and leads us from this world to another." Astronomy for Change is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to effect positive change through astronomy and science education. It is our belief that by inspiring and empowering current and future generations to become interested and engaged in astronomy and science, this positive change will be realized. If you found this video helpful and educational, please like, subscribe, and share. Also, why not consider supporting us on Patreon? Head over to our homepage, astronomyforchange.org, click Support Us via PayPal or Patreon, and choose a membership level suitable for you. Every little bit helps us produce the great content and further our mission. Also, why not consider becoming a member? Membership is free at Astronomy for Change. Choose the membership link here, click it, put your name and your first name and your email, and you'll be added to our list. You'll receive a comprehensive digest of all our videos and articles and all our great content. Joining and becoming a patron helps us grow and improve and more fully realize our mission. Thank you. This is Dr. Jim Daly for Astronomy for Change. Until the next video, please stay well and keep looking up.